everyone and welcome. My name is Kudzie Mapiye, and on this channel I do videos about my life living here in Australia, and I also share different life lessons that I've learned along the way. In today's video, I'm going to be doing another video request from one of the subscribers on this channel, and I'm going to be talking about working 2 jobs in Australia. Is it worth it? For all those people that might be looking to come to Australia, you might be wondering, do I need to work 2 jobs in order to make a decent income? So I'm just going to cover that in this video today. Now, when it comes to working 2 jobs in Australia, one thing about Australia, it's one of those countries where not very many people need to work 2 jobs. A lot of the people, and I'm talking about migrants, African migrants in particular, a lot of African migrants only work 1 job in Australia. And by working 1 job, they're able to live a pretty comfortable lifestyle. And part of that is because of one of the things that I've spoken about in my previous videos, which is about the minimum wage in Australia. The minimum wage is pretty high, so you won't get paid below a certain amount of money if you work in Australia, which is a good thing because, you know, it really makes things easier when it comes to fair remuneration. You know that whatever job you're gonna get a pretty decent income, and the minimum wage is above $20. It's about $23. I've spoken about it in my previous video, and I've also made a playlist for cost of living in Australia on my channel. So if you want to find out more information about cost of living in Australia, cost of accommodation, childcare, schools, and all that, I've got a playlist on this channel which I'm also going to link in the description box below. So please do check it out if you're interested to find out the cost of living in Australia. Now, back to working 2 jobs. The thing about working 2 jobs in Australia is whenever you work the second job, your second or third job, you get more money taken out of your pay. Now, I've got an example that I'm just going to use just for the purposes of this video with some accurate figures. So, for example, if you get paid $1,000 a week gross, like before tax, if you get paid $1,000 a week in your job, in your first job, you will pay tax of $162. So $162 will be taken away from that $1,000. That will be the tax, and then the rest is what you take home. Now, if you've got a second job, the amount that will be taken out of your pay is $283 from the same $1,000. So that's how it works in Australia. For the second job, you get taxed more. Now, I'm just going to break that down for you and let you know why that is. So Australia has what it calls the tax-free threshold. Now, the tax-free threshold in Australia is $18,200. What that means is if you earn $18,200, you do not need to pay tax. And for the first $18,200 that you earn, you don't need to pay tax. So for the first $18,200 for the year, you don't need to pay tax. So that is what is called the tax-free threshold. So it makes you pay a little bit less tax if you claim that threshold. Now, in order to claim that threshold, whenever you get offered a job in Australia, you have to fill in like your bank details, your tax details, and everything, with your tax file number and all that. So when you get those forms, there's a box that you tick that says claim the tax-free threshold, which means that you'll get taxed lower. And all permanent residents, everyone is entitled to claim a tax-free threshold. Not even permanent, all people, you're entitled to claim a tax-free threshold if you are working in Australia, right? So you have to make sure that you tick that box whenever you fill in your tax form. One mistake that I made in my first job, my first ever job that I got in Australia, when they said, do you want to claim the tax-free threshold? I ticked no, which meant that I was being taxed at a higher rate. And it was just because of pure ignorance. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was so afraid of all things tax, and I didn't want to get in trouble with the government. So I was being like overly cautious and saying, no, I don't want to claim anything that I might not be entitled to, because no one had ever told me about this tax-free threshold, and that you are entitled to claim the tax-free threshold if you are working in Australia and you are paying tax to the Australian government. So I didn't know that. So what happened in that first job is, when my pay came, because I had calculated, you know, when you do the maths in your head, I had calculated like, okay, I'm earning this much. At the end of the week, I should get this much money. When the end of the week came and I saw how much money was in my bank account, I was so disappointed. I'm like, how did I only get this much? So I had to go back to my workplace and say, I just wanted to check like how much money like I'm supposed to get after working, because you know, I feel like the money that came into my bank account was not very much. And that is when the lady told me, the lady at the office, she's like, did you claim the tax-free threshold? And I had no idea what she was talking about. And I said, and then she checked my papers, and she's like, no, you didn't claim the tax-free threshold. That's why you're being taxed at a higher rate. So she gave me another form to fill out so that I can like cancel out the other form and fill out another tax form and then claim the tax-free threshold. And then I was now getting taxed at a lower rate. So imagine if your income is $100 before tax, and instead of getting taxed $162, you're getting taxed $283. That can be quite significant. Like, that money can go a pretty long way. And so that's what happened for me, and I had to refill in the forms and tick the correct box. So please, this is for all the like migrants who might be coming into the country, anyone who might be new to Australia, or if you want to come to Australia, or if you feel like your tax is a little bit too high, you're already working in Australia and you don't really understand why, just go and check if you claimed the tax-free threshold, because you might end up with more money in your pocket. Now the catch, you can only claim the tax-free threshold for your first job. You can only claim it for one job. So if you're working 2 jobs in Australia, you can't claim, like for each job they give you tax forms to fill out. If you've already claimed the tax-free threshold in another job, you can't claim it for the second job. So if they say, do you want to claim the tax-free threshold, you have to tick no, so that you don't like kind of, if you click yes and you click it twice, then you know the tax people might find out and you might be owing some tax, and trust me, that is not a good situation to be in. So you can only claim your tax-free threshold for one job. So that is why when you work 2 jobs in Australia, or 2-3 jobs, or however many, more than one job, your second job gets taxed more. So that's how it works. So some people, because of that, they think, oh, you know, I don't want to work 2 jobs because I'll be getting taxed more. But if you think about it, if you're working 2 jobs and both those jobs are getting you $1,000 a week, one job you're getting taxed $162, the next job you're getting taxed $283, still you kind of got, you know, quite a fair bit of money left like, you know, as net income in your pocket. So it is still possible, and I believe it is still worth it to work 2 jobs if you have the capacity to work 2 jobs. For me, I have worked 2 jobs before, like just once, like when I got a job, I got another job, but I hadn't like resigned from my other job. So I was holding like 2 jobs simultaneously, and I was working at both jobs, and I had to let go of my other job because for me at that time, it was more of balance. I was still a student at that time, and you know, I was studying full-time, working full-time. So it was a little bit of a balance, and I found myself drowning. I didn't have much time to do anything. And then I wasn't even married. I didn't even have kids, but I found it quite overwhelming to balance the 2 jobs and the 2 schedules. And because the 2 jobs I was working at that time were pretty different, like they were not in a similar field, so they were very different. So I found that, I felt like the switch was a bit too much for my brain. Like, I work this job and then I have to go to another job and work in a completely different environment. I personally didn't enjoy that. So it really depends on your preference. So when you're considering working 2 jobs in Australia, just consider some of the things, like if the jobs are in 2 separate industries, like will you be able to manage that mentally? And also your work-life balance. Will you have time for other connections and other interests outside of just working? I know sometimes like people have specific goals that they want to achieve, and my recommendation will always be, like, when you work 2 jobs, have a goal in mind. Maybe you're saving towards something, right? And you want to be able to reach a certain amount of money by a certain period of time, and to be able to do that, you have to work 2 jobs. I feel like if you have a bit of a goal in mind, it's a little bit better because it has an end date. It's not like indefinite that you're working 2 jobs. So you are motivated to do that because you're motivated by the goal, and then once you reach that goal, you can like ease maybe out of the other job or whatever. But because I am such a big advocate for, like, work-life balance and your own mental health and wellness, it's really not worth it, I think, to like put yourself under so much stress just to get a lot of money, and then at the end of the day you end up burning out or stressing yourself out mentally. So really think about those things, that if you want to work 2 jobs in Australia, it is absolutely possible. You will get quite a significant amount of money in your pocket, and you might be able to achieve some really good goals for yourself, and get some really cool things done for yourself or your family or whatever you want to focus on. So that's my experience with working 2 jobs in Australia and how much money you get. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't work 2 jobs, and I think because Australian jobs are pretty full on. Like when they say you are working, you are working. So yeah, and the break times are very specific, and it's very rare that you like extend your break times. They're like either 30 minutes or 1 hour, and you can't like go outside of that time. So if you're working 2 jobs, like even just thinking about it, I'm getting tired. Thinking working 2 jobs, oh my goodness. And this is like working 2 jobs. I have other things that I do outside of my profession that make me money, but it's not like a formal kind of rigid, strict role that I have to work with certain break times. So I feel like there are other options that you can have, but working like 2 full-time jobs in like organizations or companies where there's like strict rules, regulations, break times, it honestly might be a little bit too much, like for a long period of time. But if you're doing it for a short time, I think it's worth it. You can achieve some really good outcomes for yourself, and sometimes it's just necessary to do that to get to the next step that you want to get to financially. So yeah, those are just some things to consider, that you will get a lot of money, but also consider other things, that you can only claim the tax-free threshold for 1 job, and your next job you will be taxed at a higher rate. So I hope that video has been helpful. I hope it answered the question of, is it worth working 2 jobs in Australia, and what it kind of looks like if you work 2 jobs in Australia in terms of income and tax. One other thing before I close that I just want to touch on: if you are working 2 jobs in Australia, it is very, very important that you have one superannuation fund that you choose for your 2 jobs. Because at one time in my like working life, I worked like, when you work for one company, then you go to the next company, then you go to the next company, and each company had their own like superannuation fund that they used to use. So I ended up like with different superannuation funds, and then I had to consolidate them, and then you end up losing money in like fees and charges and all that. So it's always good to have one superannuation fund that you use for all your jobs if you're working more than 1 job. For those people who don't know what a superannuation fund is, it's like your retirement fund. It's compulsory for all employees in Australia to have a superannuation fund, to have money that they put away towards their retirement. And sometimes a job, like if you go to a company, they say, oh, we use this fund. You go to another company, they use this fund, but you can have your own fund that is a preferred fund where your money goes. So now I consolidated all my super, and all my super goes into one account. So that means I can keep track of all my, retirement money, and it doesn't get lost in different super funds. There's literally billions of dollars lost in lost super that people haven't claimed, because in one point in time they worked for another company and they used a particular super fund, and then they moved to another company and then they started using another super fund and forgot about the other money, and then it's just lost in super. So you don't want to lose your retirement money. Every cent that belongs to you should still be yours. So make sure that all your superannuation money is under one fund if you choose to work 2 jobs. I hope that video has been helpful, and I will see you in my next one.